You're listening to Puck and Roll.
Welcome one and all. My name is Patrick Lorty. This is episode 12 of Puck and Roll. And this is not just any ordinary episode. This is a very special episode. Hockey is back. You're listening to this on a Tuesday, maybe, or on the Wednesday. But on Wednesday, the Canadians and the Leafs go toe-to-toe. And of course, there shall be blood. There shall be massacres. Are you crazy? This is in the 1970s. The Broad Street Bullies are long gone, but it's still going to be pretty amazing. We're all really hyped, especially after what happened in the playoffs last year. And we're going to be starting right away with Scott Cowan is giving us a quick recap of the Montreal Canadiens with the segment, The Habs Blitz.
Attention all Puck and Roll listeners, it's time for this week's edition of the Habs Blitz. I'm Scott Cowan, wishing all of our Canadian listeners a happy Thanksgiving and to what should be an exciting start to the 2021-22 NHL season for the Montreal Canadiens. With that being said, let's get into the thick of things. Going into the first period, we have the main development that's come out of the Canadiens camp over the past few weeks, goaltender Carey Price entering the NHL's Player Assistance Program. Price, 34, is coming off yet another inconsistent, injury-riddled regular season, offset by a spectacular performance in the 2021 playoffs, leading the Canadiens to the Stanley Cup Final. While the reason behind his decision has rightfully been left unsaid, Price's wife, Angela, made a heartfelt post on Instagram detailing her husband's journey, and Price's decision has been met with overwhelming support from both players, analysts, and fans alike. With Price absent, Montreal run with the tandem of Jake Allen and Samuel Montembeault in goal. Allen, 31, played a key role in the Canadiens' ultimate clinching of a playoff spot in 2021, stepping in as starter after Price went down with a concussion. A former starter for the St. Louis Blues, Allen should hopefully bring some much-needed stability into the Canadiens. Montembeault, a waiver wire pickup by the Canadiens earlier this month, should fill the backup role nicely and has some experience as a backup option with the Florida Panthers. Leading on to the second period, the Canadiens announced their opening night roster for their Wednesday night matchup against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Going into the preseason, Montreal had its fair share of contention at the forward position, and as such, the Habs will be running with a notably inflated 15 forwards as compared to just 6 defensemen. Among this group, former Laval Rocket top scorers Alex Bizzle and Ryan Poehling stand out as surprise picks, with both having seen little if any ice time for the Canadiens last season, even with the numerous COVID-19 outbreaks present in the All-Canadian North Division. Joining them as some of the wild card options in the lineup is free agent additions in Mathieu Perreault and Cedric Paquette, as well as one more surprise addition on the waiver wire. Heading into the third period, the Canadiens made a bit of a splash off the waiver wire on Monday, picking up Toronto Maple Leafs forward Adam Brooks. Brooks, 25, was a former fifth-round pick of the Leafs in 2016 and has been a regular member of the Toronto Marlies top 6 since his professional debut in 2017-18. This past season, the Winnipeg native saw some brief ice time with the Leafs in the Leafs top 6, alongside Joe Forden and Austin Matthews, among others, putting up 4-1-5 totals over 11 games. Now to round things off going into overtime, the Canadiens' regular season opener is Wednesday, and hockey fans couldn't be more excited. With a return to full capacity, a return to the normal divisions, and a return to normalcy in general, in spite of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Canadiens fans can breathe a sigh of relief, focusing on the most important aspect of Le Bleu Blanc Rouge, the hockey. While it will definitely be a tough matchup versus the Leafs, Montreal will be able to run off a new core and see how they do to start the 2021-22 season. To a great start to the 2021-22 season, I'll throw things back to the host of Puck and Roll podcast, Mr. Patrick Lorty. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Now at this time, we are going to be joined by Sebastian High, Joshua Rosa, Scott Cowan sticking around as well, and we have a very special guest with us. His bio states he's an NHL draft data analyst and independent scout. He is the head of video analysis at McKeen's Hockey. He's a YouTube creator. He collects data on NHL draft eligibles and presents findings and videos, reports, and does a weekly live stream. He is the head of Scouching. Scouching.ca is the website. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Will Scouch joins us on the show. Hello, Will. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Hello. Yes, I waved to my webcam. Indeed. Yes. Good evening, folks, and a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too, man. It is a great pleasure to have you here on the show. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Now, the first thing, I'm gonna get the ball rolling because for those who don't know you, if you can maybe just give us a little presentation as to what exactly is Scouching and what's your story? How did you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, I didn't make a PowerPoint presentation for this, unfortunately. So, but I'll just talk you through it. I know, I'm sorry. But basically, my thinking of my job is basically I try to sort of combine traditional scouting and data analytics as best I can, and trying to cut through as much bias as I can, because a lot of talent scouting can be very subjective. It can be very dependent on the individual and what the individual values. And I think there's a part of that belongs in reality, but there's also, you want to cut through the crap and really get down to what you're dealing with. And so I've been doing this since 2016, seriously for the last 3 drafts since 2018. So that would be, 4 now. Oh my God. So 4 drafts. And every year it's just gotten bigger and bigger. I kind of really sort of started it when I realized that the sort of analytics work in hockey was very much focused on the NHL. There was very little attention paid to outside the NHL just yet, at least publicly. Yeah. I had done some volunteer work with some OHL teams, just sort of digging into that junior hockey world and everything. And I thought, why isn't there somebody or something out there where you can actually look into what actually a player is doing at the junior level and exploring if there's value in the draft that can be found by looking at a player's performance and analyzing the beyond just looking at production and whatever anecdotal evidence people provide through scouting reports. Mm-hmm. So I decided to take a go at it. I used to write for Arber Prospects, which kind of also got me into working like in this world a little bit. But after a little while, I realized I wanted to maybe try things a little bit more independently, and just sort of put my work out there sort of as a resume of what I'm doing. And it's just gotten bigger and bigger every year for me. The YouTube channel sort of came up from it because, again, not very many people seemed to be really devoting long form reports to these guys and exploring what it is that they do. And NHL fans always love young players. They always love the new guys that are coming in and coming up. So it all just kind of happened slowly over the last little while. It keeps getting more and more intense, I guess you could say. And here I am.
Amazing. And one of the things that stood out the most is, if you go through your website, for example, you go into the blog section and you analyze every single team and you point out who their top prospect is, and then you give your pick, essentially being like, okay, you know what, like I agree or disagree with this. And there's a few of them that stand out. For example, like let's take let's talk about like the Canadians, for example. The Canadians, you mentioned that their consensus pick is obviously Cole Caulfield. Yep. You said their top prospect is actually Sean Farrell. Well, so if I'm looking this casually, so you're telling me that Sean Farrell has a higher ceiling than Cole Caulfield, or is
no?
No. Okay.
No. The point. The point of that exercise, like I like to. Again, like I said, this is very
controversy is what you're
exactly
doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to piss as many people off as possible. No, but the way that I think about a lot of my written work, especially on my own website, and when I'm putting out things like the piece that you referenced, and there's a couple of other ones like mock drafts and stuff. Like I think that there's a certain thing. There's a difference between sort of the common understanding of, like, for example, the average, like highest average ranked player on a draft board or something, and then a player that an individual scout might really go to bat for. So like obviously if I'm sitting in a room with Montreal Canadiens scouts, I'm not going to sit there and go, hey jerks, Cole Caulfield isn't as good as Sean Farrell. Like no one is going to do that, including me.
No.
But if say Marc Bergevin is going around the board and going, hey, sell me on a guy that's already in our system. Sell me on a guy. Sell me on a guy. Sell me on a guy. Mm-hmm. The guy that I'd be most prepared to defend or promote is Sean Farrell. Yeah. So that's a guy. That's one where it's like people might not think too much about him. I think people think about a guy like Sean Farrell more now because he had such a huge year in the USHL last year.
Yep.
But he was a guy where when he was drafted, I was like, yeah, if I'm working in Montreal's department, it's like you don't even. It's just who do we draft here? And they point at me and I go, yeah, Sean Farrell. Like, okay. And then now it's looking like a player where I can get behind him. So that's more of what I'm doing. Cause I think you can, like, most people and their dog would know that Cole Caulfield is the guy that Montreal Canadiens fans can look forward to the most. But I think that if you're working in scouting and everything and you want to sort of get more serious about it, it's important to identify case studies where you're really down with the player and why. Cause I think that really presents to people what your philosophy is and what you look for in a player. And if you can nail that down, which I think it's more difficult than it sounds. If you can nail that down, then it makes it a lot easier to communicate things properly and like check yourself and work with other people and talk to them and speak the same kind of language.
Okay, so two different guys in the Habs system that have stood out in the past year for very different reasons. And who have very different, I guess, identities as players are Matthias Norlinder and Raphael Arber Pinard. Mm-hmm. So they're both favorites of ours on the show. One is an ultra skilled defenseman, and the other is like the grittiest, hardest working forward you can imagine, right?
Yeah.
Like polar opposites, basically.
Yep.
But I was just curious, like, what are your thoughts on them now? And like, maybe what were your thoughts on them going into their respective draft years?
Yeah,
because both were drafted as overagers.
Yep. So in their draft year, I mean, Norlinder was not what he was, or what he is now. I don't remember ever hearing anything about Matthias Norlinder when he was first draft eligible. Like, and again, this would have been, I think, 2018. So this was back before I was as intertwined as I am now. And I think it didn't take me very long in his draft year for me to go, I can see why the NHL invited him to the combine and how, I thought it would surprise me if a team took him in the top 100, but I could see it because usually NHL teams don't take guys that come out of nowhere like Norlinder did in the top 100. They usually are more reserved than that. But I mean, the Habs have done a good job adding talent over the years. It's been quite a few years of that with Trevor Timmins and Marc Bergevin, in my opinion. And that's just another one of those where they just swing on skill because there's a ton of it there. And with Harvey Pinard, I mean, one of the first YouTube videos I ever put out was after the 2019 draft was, looking at guys who went undrafted that might be worth a look. And Harvey Pinard was on that list. And he went back and had a great year with Rune and got drafted in the 7th round. And that, like you said, like he's a gritty, hardworking guy. And, when he was drafted by Montreal, it's like, you know what? Like, I think even if he doesn't make the NHL, I think that's a good guy you want on your team, right? Like whether it's with Laval or whatever, that's the kind of guy that I think you reward with a draft pick. Like he was undrafted, I think twice. And I think it means something. Like I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a 20-year-old who's been in the QMJHL for 3 years or whatever and working as hard as he has and producing as well as he has. And just getting that gratification of an NHL team, not like putting you through the ringer of, we'll invite you to a camp and invite you to this camp and invite you to this camp. They straight up just drafted him. And I think he earned it. He's a gritty, hardworking guy. I don't know if there's NHL upside, but he might be a depth guy. And if you can get a depth guy with a 7th round pick that is replacement level, then that means that's one less free agent you have to sign. And he was a guy that I really, really, really liked watching. And especially when he was up at the Memorial Cup, like that's when you kind of really see how hard these guys can work. And he was out there grinding and banging and scoring and doing everything. So, really, I mean, it makes sense they're both Montreal Canadiens prospects now because Montreal does a pretty darn good job of identifying guys like that and guys like Norlinder and just taking swings on them.
And back to what we were talking about with Pinard, he definitely for a while was one of the more overlooked prospects in the Canadiens organization, and I think the same thing can be said for a guy like Michael Pezzetta, who definitely stood out a lot in this year's preseason. So, with that being said, who's an overlooked prospect in the Habs system that you like a lot, or you think has a potential?
I really like I like Rhett Pitlick. He's a guy who came out of high school. I remember watching him in his draft year. He was playing on the same team as a defenseman who the Leafs drafted in Mike Kester. And I always came away thinking that there was more to like up in that sort of Raphael Harvey Pinard kind of brand in Rhett Pitlick, where he's quick and aggressive and sneaky, but just a hardworking, aggressive offensive guy. And